Welcome to Fleet's Dam at Barnsley. I'm here today because I'm just going to be doing some cool water cage feeder fishing. The water clarity is starting to get clearer now. It is October, it's very much autumn style fishing. The water temperature has started to drop, the carp are slowing down feeding, and that's when silverfish become a lot more important. I'm on a peg here where you can park behind your peg. It's not very deep, but I'm just going to be having a session here where I'm going to see if we can catch some skimmers. I've got some maggots, I've got some pinkies, got some dark ground bait, and I'll just show you how I would normally tackle a venue like this at this time of year. Well, I'm a massive believer in keeping it simple, and that really applies to this time of year and through winter, where sometimes you just need to go very much down a single-minded approach. I'm going to be fishing one rod today, and it's going to be clipped up, but I'm going to be fishing two different areas of the swim just to cover my options. So it's a very simple approach, but I'm sure we're going to catch a few fish. On this venue they've been having silverfish matches, and just through seeing the results on Facebook I can see that all the fish have been coming actually on the pole line. So I'm just going to target a short line today. I'm going to clip up at 15 meters. So because of that, I'm just fishing a 3.3 meter rod. This is the slim. Okay, and all I'm going to be doing is fishing with a free running rig. All I've got there is a snap link swivel, as you can see, free running rig, and that's stopped with just a rubber stopper, and then I've got about 4" there of a twizzle boom, and then I'm going to be attaching my hook length to that. Okay, because this is only a 3.3 meter rod, I've got that coupled with a 3000 reel, just lovely and balanced. It's a lovely short slim rod, this one, and I've got a 1 ounce tip in this. So I'm going to clip this up at 15 meters, which is just past the range where they've been fishing in the matches, because I just think that extra little bit of range will help the fish's confidence feeding just that little bit further out from pole range. So all I'm going to do is clip a bomb on there, and I'm going to clip this up onto the sticks. I always like to count the 3 meters that are actually on the rod itself. So some people might do this slightly different from me, but I like to count the 3 meters on here. So that's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. That's 15 meters there. So I'm going to fish just there, clip up, and then wind that back on. These sticks are 3 meters apart, and that's it. Really nice and simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fish two different spots at that range, and I'll talk you through that in a minute. But first of all, I'll show you the bait tray. Lovely comfortable pegs these. This is permanent peg 63 for those people that know the venue. So I'm just going to clip that back onto there so it's out of the way and nice and safe. I'll talk you through the bait tray. Right, as you can imagine, it's quite simple, and we are targeting silverfish, and that's very much reflected in the bait tray that I've got today. So it is winter, the water's starting to get clearer, so I've gone down a dark mix. And the mix that I'm using today is the Black F1 Ringers feeder. The reason why I've picked this is because, as you can see, it's dark. It's a lovely dark mix. There's not much feed in it. It's fish meal, which I think is very important on venues like this, certainly when you're targeting skimmers, and it's sweet. Something that we've found out over the last 2 or 3 winters is sweet can get you extra bites. If it's not sweet, just a fish meal mix can be a little bit too selective for bigger fish, and I don't really want that. Certainly today anyway, because we want a few bites, and sweet can catch a fish of different sizes. So that's the mix that I'm using today. As you can see, that's been put through a sieve, but it's a lovely fine mix. There's not much feed in there, and it's nice and dark, and it stays dark as well when it's in the water. Some dark mixes actually wash out, they go lighter coloured. As you can see, that stayed nice and dark. I've got some dead reds, which are very much a staple on these sorts of venues now. Alright, don't need a lot. As you can see, the portions of bait that I've got are very small. It's winter, we can cut back on a lot of the feed. I've got some pinkies. These are live pinkies. These can be fantastic for just getting you those extra bites, that extra little bit of a riddle. It's a smaller bait, and they're very visible, as you can see, in that clearer water. And then the final thing on the bait tray that I've got are pellets. Now the pellets that I'm using today are the Dynamite Swim Stim F1 Sweep, as you can see. Now the reason why I've selected these today, I have been experimenting with pellets recently, and I have got a series of videos being rolled out on YouTube about pellets, so I've got several types that I'm going to be trying out and showing you, so hopefully you'll enjoy that series when that's rolled out. Now these are low feed, it is winter, so these are low feed pellets and they're 2 mils, so they're not going to fill the fish up too much. Okay, and the other key detail is they are also sweet, so again we're just adding a bit more sweetness into it. And the other thing that I've done is just a confidence thing. I have just added some green soak to them, pellet soak. Now there are lots on the market and I haven't tried them all, I'll be absolutely honest with you, and this is one that I've used recently. This is betaine green, it's the dynamite one. The reason why I like this one, obviously it does the job, turns them nice and green, but you don't get the green residue on your fingers, so that gives us some lovely nice green pellets. You can use your own pellets on this venue, and as you can see they're lovely green colour, which I've got massive amount of confidence in. And as you can see, there's nothing coming off on your hands, you know, there's no green on your fingers, which can be a little bit annoying. And that's it, there's only literally half a pint there, and that's all we need. So it's a very simple bait tray. Now, I'm only really going to be using one style of feeder today, and that's a side weighted feeder, and that's these. So I've got two here. I've got one for initially feeding, so that's the feeder that I'm going to start and kickstart the swims off with, because I'm going to be fishing 2 different spots. So it's just a side weighted 20 gram 5-hole cage feeder, empties really nice and quickly. It's only about 4 feet deep where I'm fishing today, so I don't have to worry about the feeder emptying too quickly. I want it to empty quickly, especially with this feeder, because this is the one that I'm going to be setting the lines up with, so that I can just quickly introduce some feed, and then, you know, hopefully it empties quick and then it's out of the peg. But the feeder that I'm going to be fishing with is again, it's 20 gram side weighted cage feeder. Really, I mean 20 gram is all you need anyway. I'm only casting 15 meters anyway, so I don't need it certainly any more than that. And it's a really fine wide cage, and that just means it empties quickly as well, and that's what we want in this shallow water. Sometimes if you're catching fish quickly, you know, if you're catching, quite often when we're fishing for silverfish, you might be catching little roach and that sort of thing, and a lot of them can hit your bait really quickly. And if that's happening when you cast in, when the feeder hits the bottom, if you're getting your bite straight away and you hook the fish, well, obviously you've got to reel in, and that is when you need that feeder to empty immediately. You know, you don't want that feeder emptying on its way back to you, which is what can happen with some types of feeder. So a nice fine wide cage like this is great in shallow water. So that's the feeder I'm going to be fishing with. So like I said, I'm going to fish 2 spots today, so I'm just going to clip this feeding feeder on. There we go. Okay, we see we've got a little twizzle boom there, and then on the end of there, that's where the hook length is going to go, which I'll show you in a minute. So when I say I'm going to fish 2 spots, I'm going to fish both at 15 meters, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset the lines. Now, I'm not going to fish 2 different ranges, so both lines are going to be at 15 meters. So I'm going to have one that's going to be at sort of 10 o'clock. I've got a little bit of space here where I can do this, so I'm going to have one at 10 o'clock, and then I'm going to have one at about 2 o'clock. Okay, and that means that those 2 lines, I've cast a bomb out, I've had a look between the 2 lines, and they're about 5 meters apart. Now the reason why I'm fishing 2 lines is I want to feed 2 lines differently. So I'm going to start off the session fishing for bites, where I'm going to be fishing live baits like the pinkies and dead reds. So I'm going to be fishing for bites, catching whatever I can. But the right hand swim, I'm going to feed that with pellets and pellet only. And that is because if I was going to come here and fish matches, I wouldn't really want to take the lads on the pole, because it's not something I've done for a long time, catching silverfish, certainly the small fish as well. I'd want to see if I could be more selective and pick out the better fish, and I think that might be a way of doing it, by just feeding these pellets on that right hand swim. Might just make that line a lot more selective, where we might not get as many bites, but that might be the line where we catch a better stamp fish, which is what I would need if I was going to come here and fish the silverfish matches, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to kick off fishing the left hand swim. I'll show you my setup in a minute when we get fishing, but I'm going to kick off that first swim. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to feed just a pinch of dead reds. Okay, I'm going to be going straight on this line, so I don't need to feed a lot, and then just a pinch of pinkies, and that is it. That's all I'm going to put in to kickstart that swim. Okay, so I'm going to put that first feeder full in there, only lightly squeeze it in. Like I say, it's only 4 foot deep, so I want this to empty straight away, and that's just going to go at 10 o'clock. And I'm feeding this line first, because this is the line I'm going to be going on first. So I want it to have a couple of minutes to settle before I actually start fishing it. So that's one. I'm going to put one more in, but the next one I'm going to put in with just ground bait. So I emptied that easily. So I'm going to put one more with just ground bait in, because ground bait in itself, it can be enough of an attractor. You know, there's lots of smells there, there's all sorts in that ground bait. It smells, there's the bit of cloud coming off it. All that is enough to attract 1 or 2 fish into the peg, even without having to put any feed in it. And don't forget, there's the splash as well. This is a commercial water, and as we know, lots of fish of different species are used to that plop. Okay, so that's it, that's that swim fed. So what I'm going to do now is fish this, or feed this swim with just pellets. That's all I'm going to put in, is these micros. And the one thing I want to do with this line is I don't want to be constantly topping it up, because the idea with this swim is to have an area or a swim where the fish are going to be settled and grazing. So all what's gone in there are those pellets, as you can see. I'm going to put those in on my right hand swim. And I don't want to be constantly topping this line up, because if I do, I'm going to be potentially disturbing any better fish that might be there. So I kind of want to feed this in a kind of feast and famine kind of way, if that makes sense. So I'm going to put three of these in, because I think that'll be enough to keep it going, or set it up nicely for an hour or so while I fish my other line and catch what I can on the other line. And try not to put these bang on the same spot. You don't want 3 feederfuls bang in the same spot, or on a sixpence, as they used to say. You want fish to be grazing on it, and if they are better fish, they're not going to graze on one tight little spot like that. You want to spread it over, you know, 50 centimeters, you know, or so. So I'm just going to put one more of those in, just pellets. Like I said, this is our selective line, and when I go over this line, we might find that we fish with a bigger bait. You know, it might be double dead red, something like that, for a better fish, or 3 pinkies. That's a great BREAM bait on these waters. I'll put this next one in. Okay, and that's it. So that's set that line up now. So all I'm going to do now is, those lines are 5 meters apart, which I think is a nice distance. I mean, when we're pole fishing, we fish with lines that are 5 meters apart anyway, or less than that. So all I'm going to do now is clip on the smaller feeder, put the 4-hole on, and then grab our hook length. And it is winter, so I've scaled it right down. This is 0.11. We're fishing for bites initially, so it's 0.11 to an MXC1 barbless hook rule here. And the hook length, because it's only 4 foot deep, I shorten the hook length accordingly to the depth. So the hook length I'm kicking off with is 30 centimeters, and that is it. So as you can see, the rig there, I've just got free running rig feeder that goes to that stopper, the stopper. Then you've got a 4-inch boom, twizzle boom, which stops tangling, 0.11 hook length, and an MXC1 hook, and that is it. I'm just going to kick off with single maggot and just see what reaction we get. So I'm just going to kick off with a single dead red and just a couple of maggots. Like I say, we're feeling our way into this session now. We don't know what to expect. It could be incredibly hard, or it could be good, but by not introducing too much, we're not going to blow the peg too early. Don't forget where your markers are. That's the main thing when you're fishing like this. Make sure you remember what your far bank markers are. And I'm going to fish with the rod on my knee today, across my knee. I'm not putting the rod down. I've seen from the match results that they have been catching lots of roach. Now I know a lot of that is conducive to loose feeding. Certainly if they're fishing casters or pinkies, loose feeding with a catapult, that can obviously draw smaller fish in. And that's something we might find out, whereas today we're fishing more of a ground bait approach. And I mean, to be honest, this is more of a better stamp fish approach anyway. You know, it'd be very difficult to beat the pole lads on those small roach fishing like this. So that's why we need to try and just pick out those better stamp fish. One thing that I've learned about winter fishing, certainly venues like this, you know, at this time of year, is you've got to be patient. You know, even when I've won matches, and even when I've won open matches or even festivals, fishing like this, quite often, you know, the last 90 minutes could be your best spell. And the last thing you want to be doing is ruining your peg before that time comes. So just be really, really patient. You know, the nights are cold now. The fish are slow to get going, and all I'll do is just give this probably three to 5 minutes initially, just to see if we get a reaction, see if we get a bite or anything. The rod rest that I'm using today is, as you can see, it's the longer rod rest that I haven't used much recently. I like to use this when I'm speed fishing, and the reason why I've got it set like it's set is because when I'm fishing this left hand swim, which is my 10 o'clock swim if you want to call it that, I can position my rod where it is at this far left hand side of the rest, and that means that I've got a really nice angle on the tip. Alright, if I was to put my tip here and that's going to the 10 o'clock spot, as you can see, it's not a very good angle at all. You can't read your bites properly. Whereas if I put the rod right over here to the left, that's a really nice angle for bite registration. Now the reason why this rest is good as well is because when I'm in my 2 o'clock swim, which is over there, that would be a really tight angle. It would be too tight for the position that the rod is in at the moment. So by having a long rest like this, I can simply, when I'm on that right hand swim, is put the rod over that side, so that I'm going to have a much nicer angle out there, and I haven't had to mess with the actual position of the rod rest itself. So I can fish 2 lines that are offset, maintain a really nice angle on the tip, and I haven't had to touch anything. And that's why this is such a nice feeder rest to use when you're fishing like this. I'll just try fluorescent pinky, empty feeder. One thing you don't want to keep doing is when it's hard, you know, I haven't had any signs as yet, so I don't want to keep banging that feeder in. What you've got to remember is that if people are catching on the pole, certainly through loose feeding, I mean, there's nobody catching with the pole here today, but I know that's what they've been doing here. What you've got to remember is that yes, we can replicate the lines that the pole lads are fishing with a feeder, of course we can, but what you've got to remember is that they won't be putting probably a ball of ground bait in every single cast. I find it very hard to believe that that's what they are doing, so they're probably loose feeding. They might be putting the odd ball in or odd nugget of ground bait. See, that was a quick bite then on pinky. I'll just go back out again. I'll not fill the feeder. So they're not feeding a ball of ground bait every cast, and that's when an empty feeder can come into play, because you know you're not constantly banging that ground bait in. Sometimes they might want it. I fished on venues, commercials like this in winter, where they do want that, but that's all they want, just ground bait, no loose feed or anything. But at the moment we're still feeling us way into the session. We've only been fishing 10 minutes, but that was the first bite then. That was the first cast with a pinky on, and that was a fast bite, probably a roach. But like I say, we're feeling us way into the session, and until we start getting bites, I don't want to keep banging bait in, because there's nothing telling you that all that feed's getting eaten. Once you start getting bites, then that might be telling you that yes, the feed that you're putting in is getting eaten, but at the minute there's nothing telling us that. So I'm just going to cut back now, just cast an empty feeder. Next cast I'll cast with just ground bait, and it might just be that bright live pinky what they want to start with. I'm guessing there were little roach that are there, but like I say, we're still early in the session, and I'm going to fish with this for an hour regardless of what response we get from it. And then I'm going to have a look on that skimmer line. I'm going to call it a skimmer line because that's the line that we've fed to the right with just pellets, and hopefully we're going to get some better fish on that line a little bit later in the session. You could probably hear the birds. They are actually, believe it or not, parakeets. I don't know if they escaped a few years ago or whether they're just bred, but yeah, when the sun's out you can't actually see them in the tops of the trees. That's like that squawking noise that you can hear. So yeah, I don't know how many there are of them, but occasionally you see them fly over, but you can hear them. Getting little indications now. I think these are roach that are there. They're just having to go for that live pinky. We might find if we started feeding more pinkies that might encourage those little fish, and that's what I'm going to try now. Just put half a dozen of those live pinkies in now on this cast. Let's just see what response we get from that. We might find that those fish that are there are too small, but like I said, we're feeling us way into the session, and that's what it's all about. It's just about working it out on each session. Well, that was a really positive bite. Just went back to single pinky. Not a big fish. It's a nice start. That's netted. A little fish in great condition. It's really cold. Lovely. I mean, they're a nice stamp. If you can keep catching them in these sorts of matches, when you're looking at, you know, 10 to 12 sort of pound, maybe 15 tops, they're the sort of fish that you can get. You know, if they're 5 to the pound sort of size, that's if you don't catch any of the bigger fish. But let's pop him straight back. But that was on single pinky, so let's just see if one or two fish have arrived now. 3 or 4 pinkies. I'm just starting to put a little bit more feed in now, because I think there's some fish there, and it might just be a case of sometimes you've just got to kind of put a bit of feed in to kind of get them feeding, some, if that makes sense. You know, it's almost kind of giving them a taste, giving them a flavour of what is on offer, as it were, if that makes sense. And sometimes once they start picking off 1 or 2, you can have that chain reaction then where they'll suddenly start competing for it, and that's when sometimes if that happens you can cut back a little bit so that they've got a taste for it. They are feeding, but you still want them to be hopefully competing for the food so that you're going to catch them quicker. Because it's fishing hard to start with, I've decided that I'm going to have a look on that right hand skimmer line before topping it up. So whatever happens on the hour, when I've been fishing an hour, I'm going to have a look on it. So I'm not just going to top it up aimlessly and then carry on fishing on this line. This line's not really kicked in yet. So bang on the hour, I'm going to go on that skimmer line and see if we can pick off a better fish. But when I come off this line, I will set it up with some feed. So I'll put a bit of feed in on this line so that whilst I'm fishing the skimmer line, this line's kind of set up for my next visit. No indications on that cast. So what I'm going to do now is just try double pinky now. Trying to make it stand out from those loose fed pinkies and maggots that we've put in. Just put double on, top and tail them. No ground bait this time. Let's just see that double, see if that double pinky gets us a fish. Those pinkies are riddling, they are alive, so they can just be a little bit more attractive than the dead reds. Well, I've had a few small fish on that line, but it keeps going dead. I've got a strong suspicion that it's going dead because those little stocky carp or bigger carp are coming into the peg. I've just had a massive, great big line there as though there was a carp there as well. So it's just gone an hour since I set up that skimmer line. I can't resist it any longer, and the left hand line isn't quite working at the minute. So I've just topped it up. I've just put about 10 dead reds in, 10 fluoro pinkies, just with 1 feeder full, and I'm going to leave that alone now. I'm going to have a look on the skimmer line, over the line where we fed the pellets, and see if we can find a decent fish. Remember where your marker is, and that's straight over the top of it. And then this time, like I said before, I can put my rest or my rod to the right hand side now of this rest, so that as you can see now, I've still got a really nice angle on that, because obviously this line is further over to the right. Just got single dead red on, just to see if there's anything there. That line's been left an hour now since I put those 3 cages in with just pellets, and if there are any greys in there, even if we don't catch one or get a proper bite, sometimes you do this and you can see indications on the tip, you know, as though there are fish, you know, grazing over those pellets. Like I said, they've been undisturbed for an hour, so it'd be nice to get a better stamp fish. So it's just an empty feeder back on that right hand swim. Not really getting many signs on that right hand swim at the minute, which normally can be good, because it means that them small fish aren't there. So it means that if there are any better fish around, it's going to give them a chance to get to that bait. I don't want to introduce any other feed on that line other than the pellets. That wind's just getting up a little bit. There's quite a few leaves coming, but that's autumn. That's what we get on these sorts of venues. Leaves going onto the water. That's just what happens this time of year. But Bit of a breeze on it, but it is a cold wind. That it is a very cold wind. So I'm not going to introduce anything else on this line, just those pellets, and I'm just going to keep trying it. I've 2 or 3 casts on it. If I don't get anything, just top it up with, you know, 10 pellets at a time in the feeder, and then just come off it again, just kind of set it up, just to keep some pellets there. But as we know, this time of year, those better sized fish, quite often they come in the second part, or the final third of the match, really, sometimes. So I'm just going to stick with it, just don't blow it. That was a little indication then, actually, but that looked like a small fish. It's just a case of being patient. It's just like, you know, when we put short lines in for better fish later on in the session on some venues, that was a tiny little indication then. Just go back in again with no feed, just an empty feeder. That was an indication of a fish there, but I really strongly suspect that was just a small fish, little, you know, roach or something like that. But just see if we can nick a fish on this line before I come off it again, just to get an idea of what that fish might have been or what species they are. Little tiny indications now, getting, those could be fish. There we go. Oh, and that's come off as well. Pinky's double hooked. Look at that, it's gone over the hook. So frustrating when that happens, but that's the risk that you take when you're fishing live pinkies on a size 16 hook. That was definitely a better fish. Let's just hope that there's 1 or 2 over those pellets now. Well, hopefully pricking that fish hasn't killed this swim. We're just starting to get 1 or 2 indications on it, but one thing you've got to be careful of this time of year is that if you have pricked a fish and it's gone quiet, is just try not to keep flogging the peg, flogging it, because then you're just delaying the chance of it recovering. It takes a bit of discipline sometimes, and it's difficult, but that might happen today. I don't know. I mean, the fish are fishing a little bit cagey today, or they are doing so far. So if I don't get any sort of indication on this cast, I'm going to come off it and go back on my left hand swim, just to try and give this swim some chance to recover. I had 2 visits on this swim, and I didn't catch anything, didn't get any indications. It wasn't until the 3rd visit that I went on it, which is this visit, that's actually resulted in a few indications. And I mean, that fish, that good fish what I've just pricked, it might have just spooked the fish. They might have spooked them out of the peg now. So I don't want to keep flogging it, because it just won't get a chance to recover if I keep, you know, plopping the feeder on it. So I'm going to be very disciplined today, just have this 1 cast, because I've got a feeling that might be what's happened. So I'm going to come off it if I don't catch and go back on that left hand swim, and hopefully, well, that was a fast indication then, but I just don't want to keep flogging it. I want to give him as much chance to recover as possible, especially if they're better fish as well. There we go, fast indication. It's not a big fish. It'll be interesting to see what it is, but that's good in a sense that fish we just lost has not completely killed the peg anyway. Shows that there is 1 or 2 fish there. Is it a little skimmer hybrid? Let's have a look. Or a roach. Who knows when you're fishing like this. There we go. Just put single pinky on that time, because I didn't want to risk double hooking again, because these are quite large pinkies. These are fresh pinkies. There we go. So let's just see if this swim now gets stronger. I'm going to keep putting a few pellets in each cast, just half a dozen of these micros. Just going to stick with fluoro pinky, because that seems to be by far the best hook bait. And I just need to keep a track on how long it is since I left my other line as well, because I want to keep that line alive, that left hand swim. I topped it up before I came off it, just with about 10 freebies. So if it looks like I'm going to be spending more time on this line, then I want to think about topping that left hand line up, just to keep that alive. It's one thing that's really important. It's important every time, you know, all times of year, but especially this time of year when fish can be cagey. It's always good to have somewhere else to back off to if your current swim dies, because things can change. I mean, we're getting indications on this line now, and the first 2 visits never had a sign, so some people may have ruled this line out completely by the halfway stage, but as hopefully what we're seeing now is the fish are just taking a little bit of a time, you know, a little bit of time to settle on it. Now, in a bid to get a better fish now, all I'm doing is I've literally put the rod down. So I've got the rod on the rest now, so I haven't got it on my knee, and that's so I can just put the rod down. I can slack line it a little bit, just like we do for skimmers or bigger skimmers and bream, and just wait while we get a proper bite. And hopefully, because it's a free running rig and the fish takes the bait, hopefully we make sure it's on, and hopefully this is going to be the way to catch a better fish now. So just putting the rod down, I've slowed it down a little bit as regards how quick I'm casting and that sort of thing, and hopefully this is going to single out 1 or 2 better net fish. Well, that's only been in 4 minutes and we might have got the fish that we're after. We have, it's a bream. 4 minutes, just put the rod down, slack lined it, had a couple of indications, but when you slack line it, you can just sit on your hands a little bit and try and make sure the fish is on. And we've snared what we thought was going to be there on that pellet line. There we go, lovely fish, and they're the ones that we're after. That's why we put this pellet line in like this, so that you can be a little bit more selective. We're only in one part of the peg, which means that if it doesn't work, you've still got your other swim where you've fed your pinkies and your maggots and that sort of thing. Lovely fish. They're match winning fish on here, you know, you're looking at 12-14 pound on here to win these silverfish matches, and fish like that are obviously gonna give you a massive boost to reach that target. Well, that's great. There's still a little bit of the session left, but it'd be nice if some of those were rocked up now, but it's been worth putting that line in and just slowing things down. Brilliant to see fish like that feeding in this cold water. Well, I've just cast straight back out and it's gone straight round again. Whatever it is came straight to the top. I think it was a bid to be one of those commercial flying skimmers that have become quite common now. Could be a big skimmer, I think, this one. Yeah, it is. Another lovely fish. There we go. Just shows you that even when a line like this is going to work, fantastic condition, this one, beautiful fish. Even when a line like this is going to kick in, sometimes it can take, you know, 2.5-3 hours for it to even show signs that it's going to work. But that's a beautiful fish. They're the ones that we get in winter that can make all the difference. Certainly in silverfish matches, you know, they're match winning fish. If you can get those coming, especially if they're going to come in numbers, fantastic. And again, the sun's just breaking through now, but it looks like they've arrived on this bait now. That's why it's important to just try and nurture this sort of a swim, you know, because you don't want to catch one on it. If you do it right, give it a chance to rest. Quite often, if they rock up, if you do it right, then you're going to catch several of these fish and not just ones and twos. That's now 4 in 4 casts now. Beautiful stamp fish any time of year really, but more so at this time of year. Double pinky, brilliant weight boosters. Well, that's been a real insight into what we've got coming up over the next few weeks. Winter is on its way and I've got loads of videos like this lined up, session videos that are going to be showing you how we fish lots of this sort of venue when the water gets colder and the fishing's a little bit harder. So if you don't want to miss out on those, hit subscribe, and if you've enjoyed this insight, please give it a thumbs up. So thanks for watching, really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday for the next video.